All right, let's dive into one of the most critical periods in U.S. history. Period 3, covering 1754 to 1800. If you're prepping for the APUSH exam, you know this is where the United States as we know it really begins. We're going to talk about how a bunch of British colonies basically decided to start their own country, which, involved a revolution, a ton of arguments, and the messy, brilliant process of building a new government from scratch. So why are we zeroing in on this period so hard? Well, for anyone getting ready for that AP exam, this right here is the reason. Period 3 makes up a huge chunk of the test. We're talking 10 to 17% of all the questions. That's massive. So yeah, nailing this period is absolutely key to getting a great score. But look, we're not going to just throw a bunch of random dates and names at you. That's not helpful. Instead, we're going to slice this period into 4 big digestible chunks. This way, we can focus on not just what happened, but why it happened, and how everything is connected. The cause and effect stuff that the exam loves to test you on. Okay, let's do a quick flyover of the whole era. It all kicks off in 1754 with the French and Indian War, which totally changes the game for Britain and its colonies. From there, things escalate pretty quickly to the Declaration of Independence and the Revolutionary War, which then leads to the challenge of creating a brand new government. It all wraps up in 1800 with the election of Thomas Jefferson, a really big deal because it was the first peaceful transfer of power between political enemies in U.S. history. So here's our game plan, our roadmap for period 3. First, we'll look at the spark. What lit the fuse for revolution? Then, the fight. How in the world the colonists managed to win? After that, the blueprint, the struggle to actually build a government. And we'll finish with the test, how that new government and a new American identity were put into practice. Let's jump into that first slice. All right, slice 1, the spark. For a long, long time, Britain pretty much left the colonies alone. It's a policy called salutary neglect, basically a hands-off approach. So what completely shattered that cozy relationship? One single event, the French and Indian War. And it all came down to a giant bill that somebody had to pay. And what a bill it was. I mean, think about this. Britain's national debt literally doubled. To handle that kind of debt, Parliament figured the days of leaving the colonies alone were over. The logic was, hey, we just protected you in this war, so it's time for you to chip in. And that meant a wave of new, direct taxes designed to raise some serious cash. And boy, did they pile on the pressure. It wasn't just one tax, it was this relentless series of acts that felt like a full-on assault to the colonists. The Proclamation Line told them they couldn't move west. The Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts. They taxed everything from paper to tea. Then came the Intolerable Acts to punish Boston. Each law just added more fuel to the fire, pushing the colonies closer and closer to a breaking point. Now, the really important thing to get here is that this wasn't just about money. It was a deep disagreement about how government should work. The colonists believed in actual representation. Basically, if we don't vote for you, you can't tax us. Simple. But the British had this idea of virtual representation, where members of Parliament represented all British subjects, even the ones across the ocean. This fundamental clash gave us that killer slogan, no taxation without representation. And this whole fight got supercharged by big ideas from the Enlightenment. Thinkers like John Locke gave the colonists the intellectual ammo they needed. His ideas about natural rights, like life, liberty, and property, and the radical notion that government needs the consent of the governed, turned this from a tax dispute into something much bigger, a fight for the basic rights of all people. Okay, on to slice 2, the fight. So revolution is declared. Now the colonists have to face a truly terrifying reality. They're going to war against the British Empire. We're talking about the biggest, baddest military and economic superpower on the planet. The odds were, to put it lightly, pretty terrible. I mean, just look at this matchup. It's a classic David versus Goliath story. The British have the world's best army and navy and basically unlimited money. The American Continental Army, it was a poorly supplied, barely trained ragtag force. And even worse, the colonies were fighting themselves. About 60,000 colonists, the Loyalists, actually fought for the British. So this was a revolution and a civil war all at once. So how on earth did they pull this off? Well, it boils down to 3 key things. First, George Washington's strategy was genius. He knew he couldn't beat the British head-on. His goal was just to survive, to keep his army in the field and drag the war out until the British got tired and went home. Second, the turning point, the incredible American victory at Saratoga. This win convinced France that the Americans had a real shot, so they jumped in as an ally. And that French alliance was the absolute game changer, leading to the final knockout blow at Yorktown, where
where the French Navy and Army were critical in trapping the British and forcing a surrender.
All right, time for Slice 3, the blueprint. Winning the war was an amazing feat, but now came an even harder part, actually building a country. The new states had to figure out how to govern themselves, and let's just say their first attempt didn't go so well.
This first government was called the Articles of Confederation, and it was basically designed with a massive monarchy hangover. Everyone was so terrified of a strong central government like the one they just fought that they went to the other extreme and created one that was incredibly weak. There was no president, no national court system, and, critically, the government couldn't tax or raise an army. It was more like a friendly club of 13 little countries than one unified nation.
And the moment everyone realized this system was a disaster was Shays' Rebellion. When a bunch of angry farmers in Massachusetts started an armed uprising, the national government was completely powerless to stop it. This event was a huge wake-up call. It scared the heck out of the nation's leaders and proved that the Articles were failing. They needed a stronger government, and they needed it fast.
So they all meet in Philadelphia to write a new constitution. But right away, they hit a major roadblock. Big states, like Virginia, wanted representation in Congress to be based on population. But small states, like New Jersey, were afraid of being overpowered and demanded every state get an equal vote. The solution was brilliant, the Great Compromise. It created the two-house system we still have, a House of Representatives based on population, and a Senate where every state gets 2 seats. Everybody got a little of what they wanted.
But just writing the Constitution wasn't enough. It still had to be approved by the states, and that kicked off a huge, passionate debate across the country. On one side, you have the Federalists, guys like Hamilton and Madison, who argued for this new, strong government. On the other side were the anti-Federalists, like Patrick Henry, who were convinced it would crush people's rights. Their number one complaint? It didn't have a Bill of Rights.
And this is so important. Our government is really built on this final deal. To get the Constitution passed, the Federalists made a crucial promise. They said, look, approve the Constitution now, and we swear the very first thing we'll do in the new Congress is add a Bill of Rights. That promise was enough. The Constitution was ratified, and in 1791, the first 10 amendments, our Bill of Rights, were officially added.
And that brings us to our final slice, the test. So, the blueprint exists on paper, but now it's time to see if it actually works. The early years under Presidents Washington and Adams were all about setting precedents, facing down new challenges, and really trying to figure out what this new American identity was all about. Right away, Washington started setting traditions, like creating a cabinet of advisors. His Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton, proposed a controversial financial plan, including a national bank, which led to a massive fight with Thomas Jefferson over how much power the federal government should have. This argument was so fundamental that it led directly to the creation of our first political parties. And then came the Whiskey Rebellion, where the new government flexed its muscles to put down a tax protest, the exact opposite of what happened during Shays' Rebellion. It proved this new government had real power. The revolution also started to change society in interesting ways. This idea called Republican motherhood became popular. It argued that women were vital to the country's success because their main job was to raise virtuous sons who understood the principles of liberty. It's a bit of a paradox, right? On one hand, it kept women in the home. But on the other, it actually led to a push for more education for girls so they could be better teachers for their sons. But not everyone was content with that role. You have figures like Abigail Adams, who famously wrote to her husband John while he was off creating the new government, telling him to remember the ladies. Her letter is this perfect little snapshot showing that the revolutionary spirit of liberty was already inspiring some women to ask for a bigger role in the new nation. And that brings us to the biggest, most tragic contradiction of this whole period. The ideals of liberty and freedom absolutely did inspire some northern states to begin gradually abolishing slavery. But at the exact same time, the invention of the cotton gin in 1793 made slavery more profitable than it had ever been. So while the North was slowly moving away from it, the South was doubling down, entrenching slavery deeper and deeper into the fabric of the nation and setting the stage for a massive conflict down the road. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Building this new nation was messy. It was full of intense arguments and really difficult compromises. And it leaves us with one final thing to think about. Those core debates from Period 3, the arguments over federal power versus states' rights, the tension between security and individual liberty, the struggle to define what it even means to be an American, how are those exact same arguments still playing out and shaping our country today?